You're listening to Inside Israel Today with Gil Hoffman on the Land of Israel Network.
We have on the line former American ambassador to Israel, Dan Shapiro, an expert on U.S.-Israel relations and American politics. Dan, thank you for coming on Inside Israel Today.
Good to be with you, Gil.
Okay, so what are the ramifications for Israel of midterm elections in the United States that are mostly about domestic issues?
So that's the first thing to clarify, is that most American voters, Jewish and non-Jewish, are going to vote for candidates for Congress based on not even foreign policy issues. And Israel isn't the only foreign policy issue, but they'll vote on the economy, they'll vote on their sense of values, they'll vote on the direction that they want the American leadership to go. I think there's a high likelihood, although it's not a certainty, that Democrats will take over the House of Representatives. It's more likely that Republicans will retain control of the Senate. What that would do, of course, is restore some of the balance, some of the checks and balances that are traditionally in the American system we often see in divided government, which would put some restraints on some of President Trump's more unusual and maybe even excessive policies and behaviors. In foreign policy and as it relates to Israel, I think the changes will be modest. There's strong support among Democrats who would give over the key committee chairs and the leadership in the House for the U.S.-Israel relationship, for continuing the strong security assistance. I think where you would see some additional congressional push, however, would be to moderate some things that the Trump administration has done in the region. For example, I suspect there would be support for restoring at least some of the assistance programs that benefit Palestinians, not necessarily the Palestinian Authority itself, but average Palestinians in humanitarian terms that President Trump canceled. I suspect there will be pressure on the administration from Congress to maybe cool or slow down the support for the Saudi leadership after this very ugly murder of Jamal Khashoggi, and because of the way the war in Yemen is being conducted with great humanitarian suffering. So I think there could be some adjustments at the margins, but of course the executive branch, the president and the Secretary of State and the Secretary of Defense will have the still most of the levers of foreign policy. So those are changes that might occur at the margins, but I think in general the policy will continue in a similar direction it's been.
And we shall see. And if the Democrats do take over the House, then there's no doubt that the Netanyahu administration is going to have to start reaching out on the other side of the aisle, perhaps more than it has been doing lately.
Well, that's an important point. The Israeli government naturally and appropriately seeks to have the best possible relationship with the President of the United States and with the administration and with the party in power in Congress. But there is a pendulum in American politics, and once it starts to swing in the other direction, it certainly is in Israel's interest to work to maintain the bipartisan support that has traditionally been the main pillar of the U.S.-Israel relationship. And so this will be an opportunity to start to strengthen those relationships as well.
So there's no doubt this election will be impacted by what happened in Pittsburgh, and you've written critically of what the Israeli government has done in reaction to that massacre. In Haaretz, you're quoted today in the article entitled "American Jews May Never Forgive Israel for its reaction to the Pittsburgh massacre," writing that the Israelis should have just come and listened, not lectured about how American Jews should feel or who they should blame, certainly not on the eve of critical U.S. elections. Has the Israeli government really gone too far in just defending an American president who's pro-Israel?
So that quote is taken from an article I wrote in the foreword, which was specifically about the period of the Shiva and visits to Pittsburgh and statements made during the Shiva. And I remembered and recalled my own visits to tragic Shiva houses and funerals among Israelis who had been killed in terribly violent attacks, and how it was always my practice to avoid bringing politics into the Shiva house, and just to come and offer comfort and to listen. And sometimes the mourners want to say things that are have political weight to them, but they have the right to do that as part of their grieving process. My advice, and it was offered respectfully and humbly to friends in the Israeli government who were among those who visited, was to offer comfort and to simply stand with us American Jews, the Jewish community of Pittsburgh, in our mourning, and to try to avoid getting pulled into domestic political debates. That's, of course, also a wise practice before a very hotly contested American election. It's always the right practice for Democratic allies to not try to get involved in each other's internal politics. But at that particularly raw moment, when some American Jews, and I, of course, share some of this, feel that President Trump's normalizing of hate of the other, even though he himself is not an anti-Semite, and even though he himself doesn't bear responsibility for the murders in Pittsburgh, has contributed to an atmosphere in which extreme people or even unstable people sort of feel there's something permissible about saying things and doing things against minorities, religious and ethnic minorities that, or LGBT minorities that really should never be considered acceptable or in bounds. And so that debate was playing out among Americans, some part of their mourning process, and I think that's a legitimate discussion for Americans to have. Of course, some came to the president's defense and said, no, he shouldn't be, in any way associated with the crime. The president himself made a visit to Pittsburgh, which some people supported, some people opposed. I think he conducted himself fully appropriately, as you would on a visit to the Shiva. My advice to Israeli officials visiting that time is to come and offer comfort and avoid the politics. The headline you read from the article, the Jews will never forgive Israel. Those are not my words, and that's not my view. We have very strong ties, and they will remain strong. But in moments of great sensitivity like this, it's, I think, advisable to try to be to listen, to offer comfort, to be extremely careful about stepping into political matters that are really the province of the other country rather than an outsider.
Dan, my last question, I guess, would be more personal for me. I'm not an Israeli government official. I'm about to leave on a speaking tour to the United States. The Shiva is over. If I'm trying to explain U.S.-Israel relations right now, how do I have to be careful, just as an ordinary Israeli, to not offend people when I'm coming from a country that overwhelmingly supports the policies of the President of the United States, and I'm meeting with American Jews who overwhelmingly are very against the policies of the President of the United States?
Sure. Well, look, obviously you should feel free to say whatever you think. You're a private citizen and a journalist, and I wouldn't ask you to recommend you censor yourself in any way. But I do think you've hit on, what is potentially a gap, and it should be addressed openly and in a spirit of friendship. It's, again, perfectly understandable that Israelis appreciate President Trump's policies that they agree with, moving the embassy to Jerusalem, canceling the Iran nuclear deal, the pressures that have been put against the Palestinian Authority. And I don't think anybody really would expect otherwise. Some American Jews support those policies. Some American Jews disagree with those policies. But since the vast majority, as you said, of American Jews probably are not supporters of President Trump, and primarily that is motivated not by issues related to Israel. It's primarily devoted by his conduct and the values that he is projecting or harming, the ethical standards of the denial of climate change, the support for gun manufacturers, the mistreatment of minorities, and so forth. And so I think it's wise for Israelis to be sensitive to those vulnerabilities and those concerns that even their friends in the United States who may not vote for President Trump feel. And be aware that it's possible to be a friend of Israel, a supporter of Israel, and also a strong opponent of President Trump. I am all of those things. And not to put people in boxes that say if you don't support Trump, you don't support Israel. That's a recipe for making Israel much more of a political football and harming the bipartisan support for Israel that it's incumbent on all of us to try to sustain. You'll do fine, and I hope on your speaking tour people will listen to you, and hope you'll have a chance to listen to them.
Thanks so much, Dan, for your time.
You're welcome.
That was Dan Shapiro, the former ambassador of the United States, of the Barack Obama administration, to Israel, one of the people who crafted the policies of Barack Obama on Israel, giving his point of view about midterm elections in the United States and their impact on Israel, and the current relationship between Israel and American Jews that is more sensitive than ever. After the break, we will be speaking to Jason Pearlman, a foreign affairs advisor to our Diaspora Affairs Minister, Naftali Bennett. Stay with us.
You know, there are people who like to do what they're told, and there are people who like to tell others what to do. And then there are people out there who are just wondering what exactly needs to be done. Which one are you? I'm Rav Mike Foyer, and this is The Jewish Story.
Listen to The Jewish Story with Rav Mike Foyer on thelandofisrael.com.
We have on the line Jason Pearlman, the Foreign Affairs Advisor of Diaspora Affairs Minister Naftali Bennett. Jason, you just came back from the United States, from Pittsburgh, traveling with the minister. Thank you for being here on our show.
Thank you for having me, Gil.
Okay, so as we discussed at the beginning of the show, there's been all kinds of criticism in Israel's sixth largest circulation newspaper, Haaretz, about the visit of the Diaspora Affairs Minister to the United States. When today, I think the headline really intensified, saying American Jews may never forgive Israel for its reaction to the Pittsburgh massacre, is the headline of Alison Kaplan's Summer in Haaretz, which followed up on the headline on Friday in Haaretz of Reaction Shows Israel Doesn't Get U.S. Jews by Chemi Shalev. Having been there and seen their reaction yourself, did these headlines surprise you, Jason?
Well, I mean, nothing surprises me, but I can certainly say that the reaction on the ground to the minister's arrival was nothing but the contrary. We had a snap decision to make to go and be with the community, to be with the leaders of the community in what is going to go down in history as one of the darkest hours in, I hope, will only be the darkest hour of American Jewry. And we made that decision. I think it was absolutely the right decision. We were welcomed by a community that had a great warmth, an inspiring desire for unity. We sat with the rabbi of the synagogue there, the three services taking place in the synagogue. We sat with Rabbi Myers, who explained in terrible detail the situation as the events unfolded on the morning.
The rabbi of the Tree of Life Synagogue who witnessed the murders.
Yeah, and he heroically was able to save some of his congregants, and we sat with him, and really the only message that came out from the visit was one of appreciation for the comfort that we brought, some of the facilities that Israel was able to offer in post-traumatic care, etc. Obviously, we're very akin to dealing with terror attacks and the aftermath of terror attacks, and we can offer best practices there. And really, we were welcomed, and we were able to have a very important visit and a few days in Pittsburgh, which in no way are reflected by the sort of follow-up commentary that we've seen afterwards.
So no one said you're not welcome because your government's policies discriminate against non-Orthodox Jews in the United States?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. The minister spoke at a vigil in front of 4,000, 5,000 people from all faiths, from the Jewish community, from the non-Jewish community, Muslims, Hindus, Christians, Sikhs, everyone was there. And he said very clearly in his speech, he said, the murderer's bullet does not stop to ask, are you Republican? Are you Democrat? Are you Orthodox? Are you Reform? Are you Conservative? It just has one goal, and that's to kill innocent people, and in this case, innocent Jews. And there is an important message of unity that has to be brought out from our response to that.
And when I interviewed Minister Bennett, and I asked him a leading question when he was there in Pittsburgh about the President of the United States being behind the murders. Minister Bennett was smart enough to not fall into that trap and just say, I'm staying out of it, basically. But later on, it seems like when he got to New York, he changed his tune and became very defensive of the President of the United States, put out statements on Facebook, on social media, defending the President. You, as his foreign affairs advisor, did you advise him to become more involved in American politics?
The minister's message was very clear, and I think it's an interesting testament to the current climate as to how people, I think, sometimes hear the message. But his message was very clear. His message was, we can't allow anti-Semitism to become a partisan issue. People who are seeking to blame the president for this attack need to take into context, the fact that the President Trump has shown time and again he is a great friend of the Jewish community and of the state of Israel, moving the embassy to Jerusalem, standing up against the greatest sponsor of anti-Semitism and terror around the world, Iran. He does so unwaveringly, and we've seen again this week as the sanctions come into place. So his message was very clear that there is anti-Semitism on the right, there is anti-Semitism on the left. Look at Louis Farrakhan's description of comparison of Jews to termites. None of this is acceptable. And of course, it's also not a new thing. We need to understand that anti-Semitism is an age-old illness that continues to afflict societies around the world. And to suggest that it's the fault of one political party or one political leader is deeply unfair, especially one who has shown, a strong stand behind the state of Israel.
So, Jason, everything that you said is right, and I can understand, regular right-wing American Jews or regular right-wing Israelis saying that, or even people across the political map, because Trump is really, the Israelis have united behind him in a way that no other people around the world have. But it's different when you are the actual official representative of the state of Israel coming to Pittsburgh before the bodies have been buried. Wouldn't it have been smarter to just tell him to not say what I've been told is the T word, just don't say Trump's name at all, and stay out of it like fire?
There's certainly an argument to be made for anything in hindsight, but I think there's a few points I would stress. Firstly, President Trump has shown that he's time and again prepared to stand up for Israel, and I think we have to make that clear. And the other side of it is the discussion in the United States really took that turn. The minister was very much there on the ground with the people, and he engaged with the people on the issues that were being raised. As you said, initially it wasn't about politics; it was about the situation there on the ground, and that was what was spoken about. Later on, of course, people do begin to raise politics, and as a minister of the government, he has an important role to make his position clear, and so that's what he did.
And then he's kept it up. Yesterday the same thing happened. I came to the Knesset with the mission of getting politicians to comment about the election in the United States taking place today. And I figured I wouldn't get any of them. And when I, in the faction meeting of Bayit Yehudi, asked Minister Bennett for a comment, he said it's an internal American thing and we're staying out of it.
Absolutely. I understand one party leader said to you he didn't understand enough about it.
Yeah, well, one party leader admitted he doesn't understand enough to say anything. And Naftali Bennett actually does understand enough to say anything, and he's smart enough to say, I won't interfere. But then in the sentence before, and then, which was tweeted afterward, he said all kinds of praise for the decision that the President of the United States made on Iran. And
Well, I think we do have to separate these two issues, and unfortunately, the political cycle doesn't always allow us the nuance to do so. But we do have to separate these two issues: the issue of internal elections in the U.S. for the House, for the Senate. There's going to be some big headlines in the next few days about that. And the other side of it is the fact that we've got new sanctions which have been placed on Iran. Let's focus on what Iran is for a second. Iran is not, just an issue in one of the swing states in the U.S. Iran is basically a superpower in the Middle East, sponsoring terrorism around the world, exporting the Islamic Revolution, backing Hezbollah, backing Hamas, backing anti-Semitism, funding missiles and rockets pointed at the people of Israel. And America, President Trump, has shown bravery and leadership against this terrible regime, a regime that has no respect for its own people, and has imposed sanctions on that country to try and prevent it from carrying out this march towards a nuclear weapon, whilst it continues to export terrorism around the world. That is a different issue, and we should not necessarily be held back on our support for this very, very crucial issue to Israel's well-being.
I totally understand that, and yet it's different if it's the day before an election. That's what Netanyahu continues to be criticized for his speech to Congress about the Iran deal, that obviously he would make every day of his lifetime because he's so strongly identified with that issue, and it's his career goal in stopping Iran from getting nuclear weapons. But he was criticized because he went and did that while an election campaign in America, and in Israel for that matter, was going on. And here was Naftali Bennett praising the President of the United States in English in a faction meeting where English is never really said. Two Knesset members that don't speak English, unfortunately, I wish they did. He's the only one in the room. Me and him are the only ones in the room who speak English. And he's putting out this message to the world and tweeting it in English the day before an election. Doesn't that require extra sensitivity?
As he said, we're not commenting on the internal politics. This isn't an issue about domestic elections in the U.S. If anything, it goes to show the importance with which the issue of Iran and the threat that Iran poses, not just to Israel, but to the whole world, certainly the whole region, indeed the whole world, the importance that this issue really must take. I appreciate the sensitivity of the timing, and of course, as he reiterated, we're not going to get involved in domestic issues, but this is an issue that absolutely is at the top of the agenda for the well-being of Israel and has been for a number of years, and the sanctions are a very, very crucial step forward.
Got it. Well, thank you so much for explaining and for coming here on Inside Israel today on the Land of Israel Network on thelandofisrael.com.
Thanks for having me.
That was Jason Pearlman, the Foreign Affairs Advisor to the Diaspora Affairs Minister, Naftali Bennett. So, as promised, you heard two very different points of view on U.S.-Israel relations as they stand right now. And, hey, I'm the journalist. I'm caught in the middle here, and I have absolutely no idea what I'm getting into as I'm about to start a speaking tour in the United States. I'll be, over the next couple weeks, I'll be in Champaign, Illinois. Actually, we forgot to tell Dan that is where he's from. I'll be in Chicago. I'll be in Florida a couple times. I'll be in Indianapolis. I'll be in Detroit. I'll be in New Jersey. I'll be in New York, and I'll be speaking there to a lot of people with a lot of different points of view on the U.S.-Israel relationship, of course, on the President of the United States. I'm basically walking into a minefield at a time when it's more intense. One lesson I think that there has been from both of these interviews is that any Israeli going to the United States right now has to be very careful and very sensitive. I want to share with you a conversation I had with an American Jewish leader the other day. And we were talking about what American Jews are going through, and he said to me, "You guys are immune, so you have no right to comment about it." And I was like, whoa, that is so reverse patronizing. We're so used to Israelis telling American Jews that they can't relate to what Israelis are going through because they haven't lived under fire, and they don't have to serve in the army, and they don't live in an intense society that we used to say. And now the tables have turned completely to the point where American Jews are saying, you know what, Israelis, you live an easy life there in your air-conditioned homes in Israel. You don't really feel the effects of BDS. BDS has very little effect on the Israeli economy, but it has a very big effect on American Jews and how they feel on college campuses. You don't have to deal with having the negative effects of the President of the United States. You get only the positive effects of the President of the United States. You don't have to deal with a lot of the internal politics that there is among the American Jewish community. And you know what? That was interesting. Food for thought. And I will certainly take that opinion under advisement, as well as what we heard from Dan and from Jason here inside Israel today. Thank you for being with us on our show. We'll be back probably in 3 weeks after a nice Thanksgiving that you have there if you're celebrating there in America. Thank you for being a part of my